Hello and welcome to Scene 6 of Brand Film Live, where you can get exclusive insights on crafting branded content from experts in storytelling and marketing. I'm your host, Alexis Wierenga, producer for Brand Film, brought to you by PR Week and Campaign US. Joining me today virtually for the first time on this podcast is Josh Greenspan, Executive Creative Director at StrawberryFrog. Thanks for joining me today, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
How are things on your end? Is this your first virtual podcast? Have you done one of these before?
It is. It's my first any kind of podcast, so this is very exciting.
Great. This is
long-time listener, first-time interviewer.
Well, I hope it's a great experience for you, and that you'll want to do more podcasts in the future, and hopefully some of them can be in person again as we adjust back to life. But in the meantime, we'll listen as my first virtual podcast and your first podcast. We'll go through this together.
Sounds good.
And before we get into the questions I have for Josh, I want to remind everyone who's listening to check out brandfilmlive.com, where you can browse great work in brand film from our past honorees over the past 5 years. And you also can register for the Brand Film Workshop and Awards happening virtually on May 7th. It's all 2 events within one day at one registration link. So the link will be in the description of this podcast, so you can click there and check it out. It's free to attend, so we'd love to have you join us that day as well as we continue these conversations that Josh and I are having here today about the significance of brand film in our marketing world today. So, Josh, I guess we'll first get started. Maybe just can you tell me a little bit about how you first got started in brand film, or your first entry into it?
Sure. So, I've been working across, traditional media, non-traditional, whether it be social, digital, experiential, all of those wonderful buzzwords in our industry, but obviously doing longer form branded film content. And then, so I've always been drawn into just different opportunities and different ways to tell stories where brands can do more than simply sell products and services, but also have just really something compelling to tell and compelling to offer audiences. And I feel like now more than ever, and that's not even a cliche COVID nod, I'm just saying, just in the content that we have such easy access to, that you're, as a brand, you're no longer competing with your fellow brands. It's not cereal versus cereal. It's the content that you put out in the world is competing with Game of Thrones and Tiger Kings and whatever the next great show is. So it's a real opportunity to kind of up your game and tell something compelling and interesting.
No, definitely. It's interesting to think about it that way, that you're up against some pretty high quality, high caliber work because people could choose what to watch. So it's a lot broader of a pool to consider what you're fitting into.
Yeah, for sure. Which makes it challenging, but it also puts onus on brands and agencies and clients to say, okay, we can't keep putting out the same old, same old. If we're going to be competing with somebody who can fast forward through our ad on television, or who can skip something online, or with a thumb swipe in a microsecond, fast forward through our content, how do we stop them, and how do we make them want to watch, as opposed to just they have so many different avenues to tune out.
No, definitely. So I guess, like you're saying, that idea of the time we're in right now, everyone is kind of behind screens all day anyways, and production's been halted. But your team has still been producing content remotely. Can you tell me a little bit about any lessons learned along the way there in your creative process, what's worked well, and how have you overcome those production obstacles?
Yeah, it's been a really fascinating time for numerous reasons, and I think it's been special for us in particular because of our client base. At StrawberryFrog, we have Northwell Health, which is the leading healthcare network in the region. We've had our, the head of Northwell, walking arm in arm with, Governor Cuomo. So a lot of eyes have been on that, and there's been a lot of pressure to get out communication quickly and to share a different kind of messaging. So within a very, very short period of time, we put out a piece that was narrated by Ray Romano, and that spirit was more of just tapping into the strength of New Yorkers and acknowledging that, yes, these are dark times, but we have been, um, unfortunately, we have uniquely experienced dark times before, and we will get through this once again. And then we kind of quickly pivoted to more focusing on the healthcare heroes, the people on the front lines, and making sure that their spirits remain strong as they're working, extended shifts, double shifts, and putting themselves and their family members at risk to save all of us. So we've really been trying to stay ahead of the messaging, but also having our finger on the pulse of just what's going on in the region and across the country, and what kind of messaging do people need to hear right now. So speed has definitely been a major necessity, and but in that, with the Ray Romano spot, that was really more reliant on stock footage and then some authentic footage from Northwell, whereas the thank you to the healthcare heroes, that relied more on kind of UGC and submissions and tapping into that organic outpouring of thanks. So for our next pivots, I think we'll be finding more innovative ways to tell stories and not rely on those kind of what's become more omnipresent creative tropes that you see on broadcast and across social a lot now.
Mm-hmm. Are there any, have you had like the proper tools for like home recording, or like for someone like Ray Romano, did he have everything he needed? Do you have to like send out equipment, or, how do you navigate the not being like on a set with all this state of art equipment or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, especially in the early going, when I think people were just in such shell shock from a production standpoint, where we didn't know what to do or how to pull it off. Everything was done very crudely and grassroots. I mean, that was Ray recording onto his iPhone and then sending that, and then really getting that to our audio mixers and cleaning it up and making sure that it's a presentable and listenable final product. So, it's still coordinating with multiple post production houses. If you're using stock footage, it's making sure that you have a great colorist who can make everything feel consistent, so it doesn't feel like it's just, ripped from, online and different resources, and it feels, like I said, unified. So it's been challenging, and I think that as we've kind of moved along this process, I know that my partner and co-ECD, Tyler D'Angelo, he was doing live recordings just a few days ago, live video recordings being patched in. They're creating virtual video villages. So I think production companies in particular are getting really innovative with some of these solutions and trying to replicate production normalcy, whatever that is, in this current time.
It's interesting to hear you say like recording on an iPhone, even because when this podcast started about back in like January, we were joking around that, the definition of brand film so broad that one day you could really shoot a great brand film on an iPhone, and now we're here in this position where it's come a little bit sooner than we thought that, but it's happening. People are creating with all sorts of kinds of tools. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective of, then the post coming into that and really giving it a unified look or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's necessary, because it's funny. I feel like we've all, especially in advertising, we've all had a client who, at the end of the call, they're just like, just shoot it on your phone, and we're like, oh God, it's just and you're trying to explain the difference of polished, production and film capture and storytelling versus just whip out your phone. And yet here we are, and we're having numerous conversations with really celebrated filmmakers and directors and production companies, in which they're like, "Hey, good news! Everyone has an iPhone, and it captures at 4K, and you can, and with a great colorist, you can make it look great and make it look unified, and blah blah blah." It's so interesting, and it's kind of that classic line of necessity breeds invention, which, with the quote, I think I'm completely butchering, or invention, necessity is the mother of invention. That would be the actual quote.
I got the idea of what you meant. No, I think we're all feeling that a lot right now of, being pushed to our limits and having to think outside of the box to find solutions that didn't normally seem possible. Um, I guess so when you start these kinds of projects now, since speed is such a part of the process, what are your first steps? How do you establish clear lines of communication so everybody's on the same page and you can get everybody working and using their time efficiently while working remotely?
Yeah, I mean, communication is always key, especially now. And it's tough, when everyone is in a little square and looks like you're on the Brady Bunch, for 12 hours of the day. But I think it's really just communication and transparency, and that includes account, creative, and clients, and just being open and honest, and just really having those, just stripping away the artifice and having those honest conversations about, okay, what do we want to achieve? What are the realities of how we can or cannot achieve it? How do we pivot? And just keeping those lines of communication, and just this is not the time for a casual by the way, and have a major ramification of like, oh yeah, FYI, we're not going to be able to do this, or hey, that
Mhm.
idea, we're not going to be able to pull it off. I think it's really working in partnership with everybody and saying, okay, this is what we want to do. Let's find the best way to do it together, because as we're learning, there are really innovative approaches to still making compelling films and do compelling storytelling. You just need to work a little harder to find them, and you can't just simply default to pick up the phone and call a great production company and then enjoy your smoothies on set and call it a day.
No, definitely. Do you think we need to, lower standards at this time for production while social distancing? Or, I mean, do you think that things are still being or can be produced at the same quality without that set smoothie experience?
Yeah, I think it'd be dangerous to lower expectations at this point. It's definitely harder. I'm not going to claim that it's as seamless, and let's just pretend like everything's normal. But we can't lower expectations at this point. And honestly think, and maybe this is a cliche as well, that creatives often do their best work when they're painted into a corner. We're hired to be problem solvers, so it's really our job to make the limitations work for us, and even turn them into an advantage if we can. Because I think about over the course of my career, and different obstacles, and whether they be economic challenges or just seismic shifts in the industry, and really the most dramatic innovations have come during challenging times. So I think, without sounding like a rah rah cheerleader, I think this is our opportunity to really show what we can do and how do we use these limitations to our advantage. And then, just specifically to talk about what we're doing at Strawberry Frog, we just launched a Zoom series where we're inviting not all of, a lot of some of our most beloved production companies and filmmakers that we really admire, and having them come and talk to us, to talk about what is filmmaking, what is storytelling in this COVID era. How are you doing it? What are the unique techniques that you're using, and the innovations that you're testing out? And that's been really inspiring. So as opposed to just kind of wringing your hands and saying, "Woe was me," let's collaborate and find really interesting ways forward.
Yeah. Have there been any, things you've tried that you've learned from or you've improved upon in this process so far, or you've learned from your filmmaker partners?
So what I'm most excited about is, from some of these learnings from the Zoom sessions, is just the different approaches. And a lot of filmmakers, and especially a lot of these production companies, they're saying it truly takes a village to make things happen. And what that means is they may actually use multiple directors on their roster to create one piece of film. So if you need to enlist the entire roster, and each filmmaker would capture a segment of this story, that that's what they're doing. And if they need to send out high-tech film packages to a particular location, they could do that. Also finding filmmakers who are also actors or living with actors. Maybe it's their spouse, maybe it's their children. So I think everyone is finding really, really unique ways to tell these stories, and I'm kind of excited to use these tools that are at our disposal.
Yeah, no, it's I thinking about it from that perspective, I was like, oh yeah, everybody in their own has their own kind of piece of the world right now that they're living in from a director point of view. That they can bring their own resources into it. That's really interesting. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's, lighting is one of the more challenging things to make sure that if you are
mhm.
shooting in multiple different locations with multiple different phones or camera packages, that it seems like like everyone is in the same scene together. But we've been speaking with some filmmakers who are even sending out lighting packages and doing step-by-step tutorials. And I think it's definitely going to be creating a lot of technical expertise out of necessity from people who didn't necessarily have it. So it's a really fascinating time. Again, I won't claim it to be easy, but it's really exciting to watch people find really innovative ways to tell these compelling stories.
mhm. So for somebody who's either, new in this world of brand film or students even coming into this uncertain like workforce, whether they're coming in as a filmmaker or marketer, what advice do you have for them in this time of, no, things just running completely differently than what they expected?
Yeah, I think that you have to embrace the reality and embrace your limitations. We all know what we can't do, so let's focus on what we can. What are the tools that are at our disposal? What are the subset of skills that we have or friends have? What are the stories that we can still tell? And I would also say, and the one thing that we're really learning through these Zoom sessions that we've been holding at Strawberry Frog is to ask for help. That's really where the impetus for these sessions came from. From our standpoint was we don't want to do the same old. So show us different ways to pull it off. Show us different ways to tell these stories. And then on the flip side, these production companies are like, all right, well, it's going to take 5 different filmmakers and a DP, and here's somebody who's a great actor, and we'll just teach them how to use a high-end camera. And I think that everyone is just going to have to collaborate to figure out the way through.
Mhm.
And maybe to tell one story, you actually need 5 filmmakers. And I think that's kind of the biggest lesson that I can share is to be open to help, be open to collaboration, and kind of use the problems to your advantage.
I mean, that ties into my next question of, it feels like, we all kind of need to rely on each other in this time and support and collaborate and learn from each other and help each other out. So I guess, in one way that looks like that Zoom calls, what does it look like, creative partners, your clients, or even your competitors? How are you learning from or supporting or sharing ideas in this time?
Yeah, I think everyone in advertising in particular would be lying if they weren't waiting to see how somebody else is creating really amazing content during this time. And selfishly, because our egos are huge, we always want to be the one to be putting out the work that makes everybody jealous. And I think again at the end of the day, we're all a community of problem solvers, and it's just a matter, and that includes filmmakers, creative agency. And I think that we need to just um, figure out the best way forward, and to not be afraid to reach out and to find unexpected ways. And it may not be the biggest agencies or the biggest production companies that find the most innovative solutions. So it's a really good opportunity, I would say, for smaller filmmakers to say, I have a great way to pull this off, and I can do it through XYZ, and it could open everybody's eyes to a whole new avenue of storytelling and filmmaking.
Mhm. Um, and I know that purpose is something that we're seeing, business as a force for good is really significant in this time. And Strawberry Frog has been tied in with, movement marketing and purposeful work. Leading creatively right now, or the ways you do this creative process, are there, what are your priorities in thinking about your team members or the stories you're telling? How do you make sure that is still a part of it, of what you're keeping in mind, what your purpose is, or living that out for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's multiple aspects of it. I think, the number one purpose always has to be to, the human beings that you work with. This is a very stressful time that we're all living in, and everyone is in a very, very different situation. I am living in a house with two kids, and I'm trying to homeschool them with my wife as she works from home as well. So that's a level of stress that I certainly wasn't expecting. But on the flip side, you have younger people living in Manhattan in a tiny studio with no one to talk to, and Zoom calls and Google Hangouts are the only human interaction that they have, and they're dealing with their own challenges and their own stresses. So, and nobody's on the same timetable of when they're having an up day or a down day. So
Mhm.
you have to you just have to have an additional layer of compassion, and it's especially tough because it's hard to be as compassionate virtually as you are when you're sitting across from somebody. You can't give them a hug. It's hard to have that personal side conversation in a hallway, or how you doing. I mean, I do my best, and I think that everyone at the agency does their best to check in and not just say how you doing on that script, but how are you doing as a person. And I think that's one major major priority. And again, that's a priority for our clients too, because they're not just the ones paying the bills. They're humans enduring their own struggles, and it's important to check in on their state of mind and have those moments. Even though sometimes I think everyone rolls their eyes at the start of a Zoom call with "How's everyone hanging in there?" Da, da, da. But I also think that those little moments are important too, because every once in a while you get a real authentic reaction, and maybe it's not positive, maybe it's somebody admitting that they're dealing with something. Or we've had clients who've had close family members pass over the course of the past 6 weeks, and these are real issues that people are dealing with. um, it's hard to now pivot that to a greater brand purpose, but to make that pivot, I think what COVID and this whole time has also shed the light on is whether your brand really has anything to say in the world. And I think that you can tell from a million miles away when a brand comes out with a piece of advertising during COVID, and you realize very quickly that they do not have a real purpose, that they do
Mhm.
not have um, as much of a soul as you can have, where they have a reason for being beyond selling product or services. And Strawberry Frog has been um, hugely focused on helping brands find that purpose, and um, that's really been the backbone of these movements. And we even worked with the Reputation Institute to create a Purpose Power Index, which was this massive research study to ask consumers which brands have a purpose and which brands don't. And I think that we're kind of seeing that come to life. And there are brands in which you're like, no, we should be hearing from you right now. You should be saying what your point of view and what you're doing or what you believe in. And they're either silent or they're saying the completely wrong thing.
Mhm.
So that's been interesting to see.
No, definitely. I feel that that tension of trying to do professional work in a time where you don't know who the people you're emailing with or talking to, kind of how they're doing, if they're kind of at their best to start collaborating on a new creative idea, or if they need a little bit of space and patience to like try again tomorrow. It's definitely you want to come strong, you want to come and strengthen your work, you want to be a part of a movement, but um yeah, it feels like a hard struggle, I think, sometimes to, balance that of like, let's be stronger than ever. We can still do great things, and understanding some people just aren't in a position at this moment. They need a little bit of support, and, helping out each other in the community.
Yeah, no, and it's hard. Like I said, you don't know when somebody's having an up day or a down day,
Yeah.
and we're living in a slightly bipolar experience where you can even tell on some video chats. You just see somebody's body language, and you're like, okay, let's give this person some space. They're struggling with something, and you don't know if it's just the daily stress and the reality in which we all live just finally got to them on that day, or there's something bigger afoot. But um, that's been the biggest thing to navigate. And at some point, the the focus on the person and their emotional needs has to outweigh a lot of things, while still trying to be as productive as we are, with the client demands that we need to serve.
Yeah. And I think, having that clear defined purpose can help with that too, because, when you're not necessarily feeling the creative spark yourself, you can tie back into something and realize, why am I doing this? What's the significance of this? Yeah, what the lasting value. So I think that's, for everyone, it's important to have that ingrained in your work and your reason for doing your work.
Yeah, and we're hugely fortunate to have the clients that we do, especially clients such as Northwell Health, and we also have LifeBridge down in Baltimore. Truist is a major financial entity that is very purposely built and purposeful in their brand. So we have clients that legitimately have things to say and things to offer, and especially when it comes to our healthcare clients, it's been really inspirational to talk to them and to work on efforts that help keep the morale of doctors and nurses and all the frontline workers up and motivated. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of pressure, but it's, to me, it's the best kind of advertising that isn't just saying, hey, check out our latest box of widgets or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
It's really trying to um, help people and calm fears and focus on facts and try and even change the conversation from how awful things are to, hey, here's a glimmer of hope, and here's some positivity that we have to offer, and it's coming from an authentic place and a place of knowledge, just not a promise of a rainbow somewhere down the line. So it's been really, really rewarding working with those kind of clients.
Yeah, that's great to hear. All right, so I want to wrap this up. So I guess I'll just have, final question ending on kind of that glimmer of hope. What are you looking forward to in brand film at this moment? Anything that just makes you excited about the future of this work and storytelling in this way?
Yeah, I think it's just seeing where people take it, because I think that we're, as much as I want to think that I'm a unique little snowflake, it's I think that a lot of people are having these conversations of how do we still tell compelling brand stories given these limitations. And I think that there's going to be an absolute boom of innovation and really just brilliant solutions to tell these stories, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and hopefully be one of the people, and StrawberryFrog be one of the entities who leads with these innovative ways to tell stories, but also just to watch everyone rise to the occasion. I think that's going to be the most interesting thing. I think that um, we're kind of coming out of a bit of a shell shocked moment in time. I think. Listen, I think that we're all shell shocked, but I think that the initial weight and the gravity of the situation kind of necessitated a particular kind of work, and now is an opportunity to pivot and entertain and tell stories again and make people smile and just find really, really interesting ways to bring brand stories to life.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's going to be, solutions that seem like short term, solving something in the moment that we realize are actually, long term things to keep around for creativity. So looking forward to seeing all of those.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Josh, and for speaking with me and for being on your first podcast. I'm honored to have hosted your first podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It was painless. I appreciate it.
All right. Want to remind everybody listening once again, check out brandfilmlive.com for information on the workshop and awards or anything else on, inspiring brand film work. And that wraps the podcast. Thanks for tuning in.